Most people are familiar with the tragic story of the Donner Party, a group of pioneers led by George Donner and James F. Reed. When they reached Alder Creek, California, in the Sierra Nevada mountains, they faced severe hardships. Due to being trapped by heavy snowfall, members of the group resorted to extreme measures, including cannibalism, to stay alive. The Donner Party set out from Missouri in May 1846, hoping to reach California in just a few months. However, a series of poor decisions led to significant delays and disasters along the way. Time and again, the group seemed to choose the wrong path, leading to dire consequences. While a few members decided to turn back or choose safer routes, most continued on their perilous journey. The party faced numerous challenges, from misleading guides to conflicts with Native Americans and unexpected weather conditions. The misfortunes that befell the Donner Party seemed unending. Here is the story of the Donner Party and the tragic fate that befell them. They started too late. In the mid-19th century, timing was crucial for those journeying to the West Coast. The optimal departure time was generally mid-April, as this allowed emigrants to take advantage of several favorable conditions. At this time of year, the grass on the plains was typically tall enough to feed their livestock, ensuring the animals had sufficient nourishment for the long trek. Additionally, an April departure provided enough time for the travelers to cross the mountain passes before the onset of winter, avoiding the risk of getting trapped by snow. During this period, the absence of modern snow clearing equipment, such as snowplows, meant that any significant snowfall could severely hinder progress. If heavy snow began to fall, travelers could find themselves unable to continue, facing slow travel and little chance of freeing themselves from deep snowdrifts. The winter snows could be deadly, as they limited movement, reduced access to food, and exposed travelers to freezing temperatures. Unfortunately, the Donner Party made a critical error in their timing. They departed on May 12th, nearly a month later than the recommended window. This late start set them back significantly from the outset, putting them at a disadvantage in terms of weather and travel conditions. This delay meant they would reach the mountains much later in the year, increasing their risk of encountering early winter storms. The late departure was just one of many factors that would contribute to the numerous difficulties the Donner Party faced on their ill-fated journey. They were slowed by high water levels in Kansas. The Big Blue River flows through parts of Nebraska and Kansas, presenting a significant natural barrier for those traveling west. On May 26, 1846, the Donner Party encountered this obstacle in the Kansas region. Heavy rainfall had recently caused the river to swell dramatically, raising the water level by about 20 feet. This sudden increase made the river dangerous to cross, posing a serious challenge for the settlers. For several days, the Donner Party was stranded on the riverbank, unable to proceed. They worked tirelessly to construct rafts that could safely transport their wagons and supplies across the turbulent waters. The delay was costly, not only in time, but also in human terms. During their time by the river, Sarah Keyes, a member of the group suffering from tuberculosis, passed away on May 29th. Her death was a somber reminder of the hardships faced by these pioneers. By May 30th, the river's water levels had finally receded enough to make crossing more manageable. Despite this improvement, the crossing was still a slow and cautious process. It wasn't until May 31st that the Donner Party fully resumed their journey. This setback further delayed their progress, adding to the mounting challenges they would face on their way to California. They only brought enough food for a 4-month journey. As the Donner Party prepared to depart from Independence, Missouri, they stocked up on provisions, gathering just enough food to sustain them for the 4-month journey to California. The plan was to reach their destination before their supplies ran low. The group faced limitations in both space and weight, as their covered wagons could only hold a certain amount, and the pack animals had a finite capacity for pulling heavy loads. With these constraints in mind, each member of the Donner Party was allotted about 150 pounds of flour and 75 pounds of meat. These staple items formed the core of their diet, but the group also packed other essentials like rice, beans, and cornmeal. These additional foods were intended to provide some nutritional variety, helping to maintain a balanced diet while they were on the trail. However, the provisions had to be carefully rationed and managed. The limited amount of food and the reliance on reaching their destination on time underscored the high stakes of their expedition. As their journey unfolded, it became clear that the tight supply of food would be a significant challenge, one that would have severe consequences as delays and obstacles emerged along the way. They put their trust in an unreliable guidebook. Lansford Hastings was an ambitious promoter of a new route to California, claiming he had discovered a path that would make the journey to the West Coast faster and easier. He detailed this route, known as the Hastings Cutoff, in his guidebook, Lansford Hastings' Emigrant's Guide. Hastings was a key figure in popularizing California as a destination for settlers, driven by a desire to increase American influence in the region and reduce Mexican control. The issue with Hastings' claims, however, was significant. He had never actually traveled the Hastings Cutoff himself before recommending it. His lack of first-hand experience with the route led to a dangerous overestimation of its viability. This gap in his knowledge earned him a dubious reputation, with one survivor of the Donner Party famously calling him the Baron Munchausen of travelers, referencing the fictional character known for telling exaggerated tales. To boost the credibility of his guidebook, Hastings offered to personally guide immigrants through his new route. He sent a letter to the Donner Party, inviting them to meet him at Fort Bridger, where he promised to lead them along the cutoff. When the Donner Party reached Fort Bridger, they were 2 weeks late, missing the opportunity to travel with Hastings. Despite this setback, Hastings' persuasive letter gave the group enough confidence to attempt the unproven route on their own. The decision to follow Hastings' untested path would have far-reaching consequences. The Hastings Cutoff added significant difficulties to their journey, including rough terrain and unexpected delays, which ultimately contributed to the hardships that the Donner Party would face later on. They ignored warnings about an untested new route. In late June, the Donner Party finally arrived at Fort Laramie in what is now Wyoming. Unfortunately, they were already significantly behind schedule, as they had hoped to reach the fort at least a week earlier. This delay was a troubling sign, indicating that the journey was not proceeding as planned. While at Fort Laramie, the Donner Party received multiple warnings against taking the newly promoted Hastings Cutoff, which would lead them around the Great Salt Lake. One of the strongest warnings came from James Kleiman, an experienced frontiersman who had recently traveled the route with Lansford Hastings, the man who named the cutoff after himself. Kleiman shared his first-hand experience with the group's leader, James Reed, explaining that the Hastings Cutoff was difficult even for those on foot. He emphasized that the rough terrain in challenging conditions made it nearly impossible to navigate with wagons. Kleiman strongly advised the Donner Party to avoid this untested shortcut and to follow the established route instead. Despite these warnings, Reed and the Donner Party chose to disregard Kleiman's advice. They decided to take Hastings' new route, believing it would save time. This decision, influenced by the promise of a quicker path, would prove to be a critical mistake. They may have been scammed by an unscrupulous salesperson. Edwin Bryant, a journalist familiar with a section of the trail that the Donner Party intended to follow, understood the severe challenges it posed. He recognized that the route would be particularly difficult for the women and children in the group. Concerned for their safety, Bryant wrote letters advising the Donner Party to stick to the well-established trail instead of attempting the risky shortcut. Unfortunately, none of Bryant's letters ever reached the Donner Party. This communication failure would later lead to suspicions and accusations. Both Bryant and James Reed, a leader of the Donner Party, suspected that Jim Bridger, who operated a trading post at Fort Bridger, may have deliberately intercepted the letters. Bridger was known for promoting the Hastings Cutoff, as it brought more travelers to his trading post. By keeping Bryant's warnings from reaching the Donner Party, Bridger may have influenced their decision to take the untested route, prioritizing his own interests over the well-being of the settlers. This situation highlights the significant impact that missing information and miscommunication could have during such perilous journeys. The lack of Bryant's critical advice contributed to the series of unfortunate events that the Donner Party would soon face. They continued to accept more migrants. Throughout their journey, the Donner Party continued to take on additional members. In July, while at Fort Bridger in present-day Wyoming, they were joined by more immigrants. Later in August, as they struggled to clear a path through the rugged terrain of the Wasatch Mountains, they were joined by the Graves family and their group. By this stage of the expedition, the number of people traveling with the Donner Party had grown to 87. This increase in their numbers further strained their already limited food supplies and other resources. The addition of more travelers, while initially seen as a way to strengthen the group, ended up compounding the challenges they faced. The scarcity of provisions meant that the increased group size put additional pressure on their ability to sustain themselves, making their journey even more precarious. They chose to go without a guide. When the Donner Party reached the Wasatch Mountains, which were situated just before the Great Salt Lake portion of the Hastings cutoff route, they discovered a note affixed to a wooden stake. This note was written by Lansford Hastings himself and advised against taking his proposed route. Hastings warned that the road ahead was particularly challenging and suggested that it would be unwise to proceed. He offered to meet the group and guide them along a safer alternative. Despite their growing concerns about further delays, the Donner Party and the accompanying groups decided to wait for Hastings, hoping that his guidance would improve their situation. They waited for 8 days, but Hastings did not arrive as promised. In response, James Reed and 2 other members of the party were sent to locate him. When Reed finally found Hastings, he was shown a different route through the Wasatch Mountains. Hastings assured Reed that this new path would be more manageable. Unfortunately, Reed's companions became lost during this search and were eventually found in a dire state, having even considered consuming their horses due to their desperate situation. The new route, however, proved to be problematic. It was obstructed by dense trees and other obstacles, which required significant clearing to allow the wagons to pass through. This additional effort extended their journey even further. At its most challenging point, the party's progress was reduced to a mere 1.5 miles per day, compounding their delays and hardships. The difficulties faced on this route illustrated the severe impact of navigating untested paths during their arduous journey west. Crossing the desert. The Donner Party members were unprepared for the harsh conditions of the desert near the Great Salt Lake. As they attempted to cross, the sand caused significant problems for their wagons. The wheels frequently got stuck, making it difficult for the wagons to move and drastically slowing their progress. This struggle in the desert also strained their water supplies. The dry, arid air required them to consume more water than they had initially planned, depleting their reserves more quickly than expected. Some of their oxen became too exhausted to continue and had to be abandoned, while others escaped, adding to their losses. These challenges highlighted the risks of taking an untested route. If the Donner Party had chosen one of the established, well-traveled paths to California, they might have avoided these difficulties. The experience in the desert underscored the importance of preparation and the dangers of venturing into unknown and difficult terrain without adequate planning. They were torn apart by infighting. From the outset of their journey, the Donner Party was plagued by internal divisions, which created rival factions within the group. The first major split occurred in July 1846, when most of the wagon train decided to take the traditional, safer route, leaving a smaller group to attempt the unproven Hastings cutoff. When difficulties arose in the Wasatch Mountains, the group that took the cutoff began blaming James Reed for promoting the new path. As the journey became increasingly difficult, tensions within the group escalated. On October 5th, near Iron Point, a confrontation occurred when 2 wagons became entangled. John Snyder, the teamster of one of the wagons, began whipping his oxen to urge them forward. James Reed, angered by Snyder's treatment of the animals, demanded that he stop. When Snyder refused, Reed intervened by grabbing a knife and stabbing Snyder, resulting in his death. Without formal legal systems like courts or jails, the Donner Party had to decide Reed's fate. The group held a vote, and while some members called for Reed to be hanged, the majority chose to banish him from the party. Reed departed alone, leaving his family behind, though he would later reunite with them after the arduous journey to California. The hardships faced by the Donner Party continued. 2 days after the incident with Snyder, a 70-year-old man became too weak to carry on and was left behind, unable to continue. As the situation grew more desperate, instances of cannibalism emerged, mostly involving the deceased settlers. However, in one tragic event, William Foster, a member of the party, shot 2 Native Americans who had joined the group. Foster and others then used their remains for sustenance. These grim choices reflected the dire circumstances and the extreme measures taken by the survivors as they struggled to stay alive. They did not protect their cattle properly. The Donner Party set up camp at Humboldt Sink, a dry lake bed in Nevada, where they stayed for several days. This stopover was necessary for their cattle, which needed time to rest and graze to stay healthy for the remainder of the journey. However, the party members failed to properly guard their cattle, and one night, 21 of them were stolen by a nearby Native American tribe. Throughout the journey, the Donner Party continued to suffer losses of their livestock. Cattle either died from exhaustion, were shot, or were taken by Native Americans. By the time these incidents accumulated, the party had lost nearly 100 cattle. These losses had a significant impact on the Donner Party's progress. With so many cattle gone, they no longer had enough animals to pull all their covered wagons. This forced many of the settlers to walk, often carrying heavy loads themselves. Moreover, the dwindling number of cattle meant they lost a potential emergency food source, further complicating their survival in the harsh conditions they faced. The situation underscored the importance of livestock for transportation and sustenance, as their absence placed an additional burden on the already struggling group. They ran out of food. The Donner Party had planned to reach California by late August or, at the latest, early September. However, as September came and went, they were still in Nevada, slowly making their way toward the Sierra Nevada mountain range. By this time, they realized they did not have enough food to complete the journey. Facing dwindling supplies, the party decided to send Charles Stanton and William McCutcheon ahead to Sutter's Fort in California to gather additional provisions. Although they managed to bring back some food, the supplies they obtained were not enough to sustain the entire group for the rest of their journey. This critical shortage highlighted the importance of timing and planning for such expeditions. The party's delay in reaching the Sierra Nevada before the onset of winter further complicated their already dire situation, leading to even greater challenges in their struggle for survival. They got stuck in an early snowstorm. By October 1846, the Donner Party reached Alder Creek, California, located in the Sierra Nevada mountains, just beyond the state line. They had heard that the snow wouldn't start until November, so they decided to attempt crossing the mountains. Unfortunately, an early snowstorm trapped them, leaving them stranded for several months. As their food supplies ran out, they were forced to survive on whatever they could find. Initially, they consumed cattle bones and hides, followed by leather, tree bark, and even parts of their hide shelters. When these resources were exhausted, they were left with no choice but to resort to cannibalism to endure the harsh winter. Out of the 87 people who entered the Wasatch Mountains, only 48 survived to reach their final destination, along with 3 mules. This tragic outcome underscored the severe challenges faced by the party and the harsh realities of survival in such extreme conditions. The journey of the Donner Party is a tragic reminder of how even small mistakes can snowball into disaster. From poor timing and unreliable routes to unexpected weather and a lack of resources, each misstep led them further into peril. Their story is not just about survival against the odds, but a cautionary tale about the importance of preparation, wise decisions, and sometimes the luck of the draw. If you found this tale of history both fascinating and harrowing, hit that subscribe button. Don't miss out on more intriguing stories from the past, where we dive deep into the events that shaped our world. Subscribe now and join us on a journey through time.